on, everybody? Welcome to the channel. We got a TM175 that we got to go through today. The customer brought it in, it ran, did not move. Rear bearings were blown out of it, so we got to do carrier bearings, clutch. We've got to figure out what's wrong with the clutch. Got to get this thing to stop draining fuel, make it run correctly, go through the whole thing, make sure everything's all square so this guy's got a solid three-wheeler to ride. She starts, she runs, doesn't move. Quite a few things we found on it as we went through it. Needed a new wrist pin bearing. The crank was good, wrist pin bearing was bad. Rear carrier bearings were bad, brake pucks were good. He wanted new clutch plates, needed to check the crank bearings to see if there was any play in those, to see if the seals were working. We found a major issue with the clutch basket. That's the pressure plate, and that ring that's hanging there is a stay ring. Checking the overlap on the gears to make sure all that's okay. Give the crank a little wiggle. That is the direct connect to the crank right there. That's the drive gear for the clutch basket. This trike had a lot of learning experience as I went through it, that's for sure. I have not worked on one of these before. I've worked on plenty of other three-wheelers. If you've seen in the videos that I've posted, three-wheelers are like common. They roll through here like water. Love working on them, and I'm not afraid of the challenges. This thing was a lot of fun because there was so much weird stuff on it that is not typical of a three-wheeler. Now, I blame this personally on the fact that Honda smashed Yamaha in the late 60s with patent infringement. Honda came out with three-wheelers, Yamaha followed suit. Yamaha's three-wheelers were too close to Honda's, so Honda blasted them with a cease and desist, and they couldn't make three-wheelers for a while. So when Yamaha turned around and started making three-wheelers again, they didn't make that many as in models. They had the 200, the 175, the 50, the Trie Z250. They had the DX225, which was their equivalent to the Honda ATC 250SX, kind of a sport utility. But other than that, Yamaha basically turned around and changed all of their designs. They weren't going to do what Honda was doing. That way nobody could say they were copying anybody. Now, they came back out in the early 80s. They started making three-wheelers, started competing with Honda. Kawasaki came out with a couple of three-wheelers, mainly a KLT 200, a KLT 110, and their KXT 250R, which was their race three-wheeler. That thing was supposed to be the baddest out of the crate three-wheeler made production-wise. Unfortunately, the glue they used under magnets in the flywheels sucked. It deteriorated. Magnets fell off and destroyed stators. These things are also amazing rattle traps because they didn't have a counterbalancer, so if you didn't have stock and Loctite, everything was coming apart on them. Nowadays, parts for these things, because of the rarity of them, are super high. So if you've got one, it's really good to hold on to because the value is only going to increase. I've got three. I've got an 86 and two 87 T3s that I'm going through and redoing. There will be videos of those in the future. Right now on this little Yamaha 175, we're redoing the bearings and the carrier. Now we're playing with the piston, checking the rod for play. There was a little bit of play in the wrist pin. There was no play in the connecting rod to crank. That was good. So basically, we're just going to replace the wrist pin bearing, put it all back together. This thing had great compression. The rings were fine. Everything in it was good. There was nothing wrong with it really interior aside from the wrist pin bearing. Not quite sure why the wrist pin bearing decided to start to get loose, but there's all kinds of reasons. Could be just one faulty premix. So we popped the piston off. Then go ahead and replace the wrist pin bearing, put it all back together. Of course, you dip the wrist pin bearing in two-stroke oil before you put it in there. That way it's all pre-lubed and you're good to go. Never put these things in dry. Ever. So, back to the history with three-wheelers, because it's kind of neat. If you look at everything before they put moratorium on the production of three-wheelers, which was only 20 years. That's why you see all of the road three-wheelers. There is a new moratorium saying something about production of three-wheelers again because the Department of Safety decided that they didn't like three-wheelers again. But it is what it is. Three-wheelers will always be under the target just because of what they are and the stigmas that were put on them in the 80s, which were all pretty falsified. I mean, I'd hate to have one of these 1,000-pound four-wheelers nowadays roll over on me. I'd rather have a three-wheeler roll on me all day long. But Suzuki also made a couple of three-wheelers. They weren't really impressive. They kind of went straight to the quad and made the LT250R and ran with that. Now back to Yamaha's story though. Because they had to do everything all weird, these learning curves are strange because they're not like other bikes. The Trie Z250's got the tank in the back, the airbox up top. It completely changed the riding ergonomics of the bike and how it handled. I really like how Yamaha's actually handled. They did a good job not following suit and kind of reinventing the wheel, so to speak. This clutch setup, on the other hand, it's an automatic clutch, semi-automatic. Honda definitely had engine designs in the bag. Counterbalancers and well-designed engines that weren't super complicated. That nut in the middle, the bolt with the two nuts in the middle, that holds the cover on. That little plate underneath, it's got 3 balls in it. They're on ramps, so as you move the shifter, it opens and closes the clutch basket. Now after we pop the cover off here, we can show you. This is a really strange design. It's got balls on the inside underneath the plates. It's got a 2-piece pressure plate that's held in with a ring clip. That ring clip, if the groove in the basket's wore or the ring clip's bent, it won't stay in. That was one of the problems with this particular three-wheeler. He needed a new basket and a new clip. So after we got it all apart, we put a new basket and everything in it. That cured the problem with the ring clip popping out. One of the other interesting things is there's an aluminum plate in between 2 steel plates. That's a semi-slip friction plate. So as I'm stacking these plates, taking everything out of the oil, the new plates, taking them out of the oil, stacking, there's the aluminum plate. That helps with the semi-automatic. The big 1/2-inch balls you see there sit at the bottom of the basket. Centrifugal clutch pushes them up ramps. They engage the clutch pack. Kind of like a Recluse clutch, except the Recluse has the balls on the outside pressure plate. These are on the bottom, all the way at the base of the clutch basket. And then you've got that double plate that's got other springs in it. That nut that's in the middle, or the bolt that's in the middle of that outer pressure plate, the 2 nuts need to be set correctly. There's also a one-way sprag in this basket. One-way sprag makes it so that the inner clutch hub spins freely, only one way. That's how you get the semi-automatic clutch. It allows the engine to spin without the transmission spinning. 1/2-inch balls engage things as long as you've got the nuts and that outer adjuster adjusted correctly. Now if you go online and you look, it says to do it one way. They do not explain which direction they're starting from, which makes things really complicated because this clutch is a pain in the butt to adjust if you don't know what you're doing. So basically, in a nutshell, what you do is, once you've got the clutch cover back on, and you've got that ramped plate on the outside of the cover, you run the 2 nuts on, you bottom them out. Now, as you spin the threaded part, it's on a pancake bearing, so it'll spin and do absolutely nothing. You need to put a little bit of pressure on that stud, just enough so that it still spins, but it doesn't wobble. There's no looseness to it. You need it kind of tight so that it actually disengages the clutch pack. What it does is it pulls the inner plate of that 2-plate stack up and disengages the plates. But you need to only have it disengaged barely. So you run the nuts in till you feel pressure. You twist it maybe a full turn. That way, when you give the engine gas, the balls on the back side of the basket push up the ramps. They don't move that far, but it engages the clutch and makes it so that you go. Now, I only know this because I had this cover off and I adjusted this clutch 6 times before I got it correct. So, like I said, learning curve, yeah. Rear axle, really neat. Got lock nuts with splined lock washers, both sides. Kind of a neat design. Honda didn't do that. This way you can get both of the hubs off rather simply. Put it all back in. Everything's got nice new powder in it. Brakes are all cleaned up. Everything's all nice and pretty and working correctly. Really happy with that. All new bearings, all new seals, fresh powder. Everything's nice and shiny. The rear end actually got polished up some, so that's all nice and pretty too. The carrier, that is. Had a lot of fun with this build. Oil injection unit worked, so we kept that hooked up. We kept everything plumbed. Put the cable on it, took it off, put it on, took it off. You know, the whole fun of, whoops, got to do it a few times. Definitely pull the clutch cover when it's sitting on its side. Initially, when I pulled the clutch apart, I pulled that first basket off, clutch plate shifted, all the balls fell out. Was not aware that was going to happen. Alright, so we're going to get on the test ride. I'm going to jump off here. If you guys haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Comments, always welcome. Likes, always appreciated. Have a great day. I'll let you hear what the customer's got to say at the end.
Running down the road, it's clearing up now.